The descent module vibrated with increasing intensity as it passed through the atmosphere of Leon, a world covered in endless oceans of an impossible sapphire hue. Ethan Lowe, the youngest member of the expedition, watched with a mix of awe and anxiety as the sensors on the panel flickered with unfamiliar readings. First contact with an alien civilization was an honor few ever experienced, and now he was part of this historic moment. His voice trembled with excitement as silhouettes of bioluminescent structures emerged on the surface. Curved, spiral-like buildings rose from the water, reflecting the light of Leon's twin suns. The Lien race had sent a greeting signal, but cultural differences remained uncharted territory. When the hatch opened, they were greeted by tall, slender figures with semi-transparent skin that shimmered in the shifting light. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He stepped forward to bow respectfully, but slipped on the wet platform, barely catching himself. His breath hitched as he accidentally touched the hand of the nearest Lien, a tall, imposing figure with pearlescent eyes and clothing adorned with crystals. A grave silence fell over the gathering. "Tell me this doesn't mean something terrible," someone muttered behind him. The Lien's expression showed no anger, but their gaze locked onto Ethan with unsettling intensity. Then one of the Lien elders spoke in their melodic language, and the translator relayed the words in a calm tone. "The young Earthling has initiated a sacred bond." Ethan blinked, panic spreading through his body. "Sacred? What does that mean?" The elder bowed his head. "He has chosen the Firstborn as his companion." Ethan's face paled. "The Firstborn? What?" Before he could process the situation, he found himself in a colossal predicament, feeling dozens of eyes filled with expectation, confusion, or astonishment. He realized that in one moment, he had altered the course of his mission. Captain Reynolds coughed, attempting to intervene. "Forgive us. This is a mistake." "My crewman meant no." The elder raised a hand, silencing him. "The bond is established. It is not about intention, but destiny." Ethan swallowed hard. "Can it be undone?" The elder's gaze was unwavering. "The sacred bond is not to be taken lightly. Only trials of unity will determine if you are truly meant to walk together." Reynolds exhaled in frustration. "And if we fail these trials?" The elder's expression remained stoic. "The bond will be considered an insult, a violation of the balance between our species." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Either he would pass these trials with Ares, the Firstborn, or humanity's mission on Leon would end before it began. Ares stepped forward, her gaze fixed on him. "It seems fate has chosen an unexpected path for us." Ethan, the young astronaut, struggled to find words, his mind a whirlwind of chaos. Yet something in her eyes suggested that beneath the traditions and rituals, she, too, wanted to understand who he was and what the strange bond meant. Hours later, twilight painted Leon's sky in shades of green and purple as Ethan walked along a path illuminated by bioluminescent plants. The trial was approaching, and though he didn't know what to expect, one thing was clear. He couldn't afford to fail. Ares turned to him, her expression analytical. "You're not what I expected of an Earthling." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And what did you expect?" She hesitated. "More predictable, less impulsive." Ethan chuckled softly. "Trust me, I didn't plan for this either." A faint smile flickered across Ares' lips but vanished as they approached a circular altar surrounded by columns. The Lien elder awaited them, flanked by spectators. "The first trial of unity," the elder announced, "will be the trial of winds." The columns began to hum, and a cold, energy-laden wind rose from nowhere. Ghostly shadows emerged from the ground, swirling in a mesmerizing dance. "You must walk the path of winds without disrupting the balance," the elder said. "If you falter, the wind will claim you." Ethan locked eyes with Ares. He didn't fully understand what they were facing, but he knew one thing. If they wanted to pass, they would have to learn to trust each other. Ares extended her hand. "You won't survive if you don't follow my lead." Ethan grasped her hand firmly, feeling the warmth of her semi-transparent skin, and together they stepped into the unknown. The wind's pressure was relentless, cutting through Ethan's resolve. Shadows circled them like living entities, waiting for a misstep. Ares showed no fear, her grip steady, her posture relaxed yet precise. "Don't resist the wind," she said, her voice barely audible over the howling gusts. "Let it pass through you." Ethan nodded, though it was easier said than done. As they progressed, the wind's force grew, threatening to knock them off their feet. A column of dark energy grazed Ethan's face, sending a shiver down his spine. "What happens if it touches us?" he asked through gritted teeth. Ares didn't look away from the path. "The dark wind doesn't just claim the body. It takes fragments of the mind." Ethan swallowed. "Great. Lose the trial, lose my memories." Their steps became more synchronized, Ethan learning to mirror Ares' movements. He began to notice a pattern in the gusts, a rhythm to the shadows' dance. But then the wind shifted, a gentle breeze transforming into a gale. The ground trembled, and Ethan felt a sharp tug at his consciousness, as if something was trying to rip away the threads of his memories. Fragments of his childhood, his training at the Space Academy, his first view of Earth from orbit, all flashed through his mind before Ares' voice anchored him. "Look at me," she commanded, her pearlescent eyes piercing his. "Don't let it take you." Ethan clung to her voice, the only stable point in chaos. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on her hand, and took the final step. The wind roared with fury and then vanished. Ethan gasped for air, sweat dripping from his brow. They stood on the other side of the altar, on solid ground. The Lien elder nodded with approval, and something else, surprise. "You have passed the first trial," he declared. Whispers filled the air. Ares bowed her head respectfully, but when she looked at Ethan, there was something new in her gaze. "I didn't expect you to withstand the final gust," she admitted. Ethan gave a nervous laugh. "Let's just say stubbornness is one of humanity's talents." Ares held his gaze, as if seeing something in him she hadn't noticed before. The elder raised his hand, calling for silence. "The next trial will not test the body or the mind, but the truth." Ethan frowned. "The truth?" The elder's gaze was grave. "Here, before all, you must reveal your deepest secrets. If either of you hides anything, the bond will shatter, and the consequences will be irreversible." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Ares' face was unreadable, but there were things he couldn't reveal, things his government had forbidden him to share. If he said too much, he could jeopardize the mission. If he said too little, he could doom himself. For the first time, Ares seemed uncertain too. The air grew heavy. "We both have secrets," Ethan said softly. The silence between them stretched as dozens of Lien watched, holding their breath. The elder raised his hand, and a crystalline structure rose from the ground, pulsating with energy. "The mirror of truth," he proclaimed. "It will reflect what you hide in your hearts. Only those who can face their own essence will pass this trial." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "It will show everything, even the things I don't want to admit." Ares didn't take her eyes off the mirror. "This isn't just an artifact," she murmured. "It doesn't just reveal our secrets. It makes them real." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the crystal flared with a deep, vibrating light. The world shifted. Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath him, and suddenly, he wasn't in the ceremonial space anymore. Earth spun majestically below him, his spacesuit reflecting the sunlight. But something was wrong. This wasn't just a memory. It was his recurring nightmare. A suit malfunction, an oxygen leak, the searing cold of the void gripping his body. He desperately moved his arms, but his body wouldn't obey. His vision blurred, and the voice of mission control echoed distantly in his helmet. Then, a voice cut to the terror, like a beam of light. "This isn't real." Ethan turned his head and saw her. Ares, floating beside him without a suit, her body seemingly adapted to the vacuum. Her pearlescent eyes glowed, reflecting something Ethan couldn't fully grasp. "The mirror pulls out your deepest fear," she said firmly. "If you let it consume you, it will make it your eternal reality." Ethan struggled to breathe, panic clawing at his consciousness. But Ares' words became his anchor. He forced himself to focus on the warmth of her voice amidst the absolute cold. Summoning all his strength, he reached out and grabbed her hand. Everything shattered. The cosmos cracked like glass, and the light of the Lien temple rushed back in. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping for air. Cold sweat dripped down his back. Whispers filled the room, but all he could see was Ares, who was also trying to catch her breath. "You saw it?" he asked, still shaken. Ares nodded slowly. "That was your truth, your deepest fear." A chill ran through Ethan. She had seen everything. The elder watched them closely. "The trial is not yet over." Ethan struggled to his feet and looked at Ares. She was silent, but her eyes reflected an inner turmoil. The light of the mirror of truth flared again. Now it was Ares' turn. For the first time, Ethan saw fear her gaze. The mirror's light grew brighter, and a shiver ran down his spine. The trial now rested on Ares, and though she had shown unyielding strength before, the mirror enveloped her, and in an instant, the temple vanished. Ethan blinked and found himself in another world. Before him stretched an endless ocean, its waves shimmering under a sky with 3 moons. In the distance, black crystal towers rose like ancient sentinels. But the silence was shattered by a heart-wrenching scream. Ethan turned sharply and saw Ares on her knees on the wet sand, her face twisted in pain. Before her lay the lifeless body of another Lien, their skin pale and empty, their pearlescent eyes devoid of life. Ares clenched her fists, her voice trembling. "No, not again." The scene shifted. Now they stood atop a massive structure, an ancient tower covered in carved symbols. Before Ares stood a group of Lien, their gazes filled with scorn, their faces frozen in harsh judgment. One of them, a tall elder with regal bearing, spoke in a voice as cold as steel. "You have failed your people, Firstborn. You are unworthy of leadership. You are unworthy of the bond." Ares' figure wavered, the light of her skin darkening as if consumed by guilt. Ethan felt rage rise within him. "No, I won't let this destroy her." "Enough," he growled, stepping forward. The elders and the other Lien turned to him coldly. "This does not concern you, Earthling." Ethan clenched his teeth and looked at Ares. She remained on the ground, motionless, bound by her own pain. He understood. This was her fear of failure, the burden of others' expectations. He knelt beside her and spoke firmly. "Ares, listen to me. This isn't reality. This is your fear, your guilt, but it's not the truth." She didn't respond. Ethan took a deep breath and continued, softer this time. "You're not alone. You don't have to carry this by yourself." Finally, she lifted her head. Her eyes reflected a storm, but also surprise. The Lien elder dissolved like smoke, and the tower shattered into thousands of pieces. The Lien temple returned in a flash of light. Ares gasped, her body trembling. Ethan was still beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. The elder who had observed the trial nodded solemnly. "The bond remains unbroken." A murmur rose in the hall. No one had expected the Earthling to endure both trials. Ares looked at Ethan differently now, with respect and something more. But the trials were not over. The elder raised his hand. "The final trial is the most difficult. It is not of the mind or spirit, but of sacrifice." Ethan's throat tightened. "Sacrifice?" The elder's gaze was grave. "To prove the true strength of your bond, one of you must give up something priceless." Silence hung in the air like a stone slab. All eyes were on Ethan and Ares, waiting for their reaction. Ares straightened, her breathing still heavy from the trial, but determination flashed in her eyes. "I will make the sacrifice." Ethan shook his head vehemently. "No, absolutely not." She looked at him seriously. "Ethan, you've already been through too much in the last trial. If anyone should do this, it's me." Ethan shook his head again. "No, if anyone's going to do this, it's me." Before Ares could argue, the elder intervened. The choice is made. The mirror of truth trembled, and the hall filled with bright energy. "Ethan Lowe, you must choose what you will lose." The air grew heavy. Ethan swallowed. Something that defined him. Something that made him who he was. His thoughts raced in a chaotic whirlwind. Family, memories of Earth, the knowledge he had gained as an astronaut. But then his gaze met Ares's, and he understood. Taking a deep breath, he spoke firmly. "I give up the path back." Ares's eyes widened in surprise. The elder nodded solemnly. "Your choice is made." The mirror flared with blinding light, and Ethan felt something inside him tear, as if a part of his very essence was being uprooted. His vision darkened, his consciousness drifting, falling into an endless void. When the light faded, the hall returned to its former state, but Ethan immediately knew what had changed. The coordinates for the return journey, the evacuation routes, the plan to return to Earth, all of it was gone from his memory. He remembered his home, his training, his mission, but the way back had vanished. Ares looked at him, something deep glimmering in her pearlescent eyes. You gave up your only guarantee of returning home. Ethan swallowed. Yes. She studied his face intently, then, to everyone's surprise, extended her hand. If that is your sacrifice, then I will teach you to live on Leon. Ethan looked at her and took her hand. The elder nodded. The bond is sealed. The Lien bowed their heads in respect. The earthling had proven his devotion, but as a hall filled with whispers, Ethan felt something else. Something deep within him had changed, awakened. Ares felt it too, and far beneath Leon's oceans, an ancient creature opened its eyes. Ethan felt a cold shiver run through him, as if something invisible was watching him directly. Ares tensed, her pearlescent eyes reflecting strange unease. The elder looked up at the mirror of truth, which still vibrated, emitting an unyielding light. The ground beneath Ethan's feet cracked, and a roar echoed through the sky. A voice thundered in his mind. You have broken the cycle. Sharp pain pierced Ethan's consciousness, as if his mind had connected with something beyond his understanding. Flashes of images overwhelmed him. The history of Leon, its ancient guardians, the sacrifices made by generations to maintain balance. The truth was clear. The sacrifice he had made was not just his own. He had altered the fate of the planet. The creature roared again and the sky trembled. Ares grabbed Ethan's hand. We must stop it before it destroys everything. Ethan looked at her, and something clicked within him. He couldn't return to Earth, but he could ensure his sacrifice meant something. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. Stop. His voice echoed, filled with a strength he didn't know he possessed. The creature froze. Ethan felt a connection between them, not of rage, but a confusion. His sacrifice had broken ancient chains, unleashing a force locked away for millennia. He could fix this. Closing his eyes, he allowed the energy of the mirror of truth to flow through him. He saw his home, Earth, his mission, and understood what he needed to do. Extending his hands, he directed the energy into a single intention, balance. A flash of light enveloped Leon. The creature's roar turned into a deep hum, its rage fading as it sank back into waters, leaving the sky clear and the land calm. The Lien stood in silence, awestruck. The elder spoke first. Ethan Lowe, you have achieved the impossible. Ares looked at him with respect and something more. Ethan smiled wearily. I just did what I thought was right. A gentle breeze swept through the temple, as if the planet itself acknowledged his choice. There was no way back, but in Ares' eyes and the way the Lien now looked at him, Ethan realized he might have found a new home.